Imagine the world in silence, a heavy silence, broken only by a sound that, for some, was a relief, for others, a constant melancholy. Welcome to our channel, where we unravel stories that make us rethink the past. Today, we will delve into the unique perspective of a 6-year-old child amidst the turmoil of World War II. A vision that, through its purity and innocence, can reveal surprising truths to us. Scene: a small boy, named Leo, 6 years old, is sitting near a window, attentively watching a group of sparrows perched on a wire. His eyes are fixed on the birds, and he seems to be listening with great concentration. The year is 1943. In a small village in the countryside, far from the major battle centers, but still under the constant shadow of the conflict, lives Leo. For most children, the chirping of birds is just a pleasant sound of nature. But not for Leo. Ever since the war began to change the routine of a small community, with the arrival of soldiers, the sounding of sirens, and the whispered conversations of adults, Leo began to notice something different in the behavior of the birds. At first, they were just coincidences. A flock of crows would caw loudly just before a noisy military truck passed by on the road. The soft song of a nightingale seemed to precede the moments of calm that followed air raid alerts. Over time, these casual observations turned into an unwavering conviction in Leo's mind. The birds were talking, not in just any language, but in a secret code, a language that he, somehow, felt he needed to decipher. He would spend hours watching them, trying to identify patterns in their songs, in their flights, in their movements. To his parents and neighbors, it was just the fertile imagination of a child. Let the boy have his fantasies, they would say, without imagining the seriousness with which Leo took his discoveries. He tried to share his theories, explaining how the sharp chirping of a canary seemed to warn of the arrival of strangers, or how the circling flight of an eagle announced good news, or at least the absence of bad news. But his efforts were met with condescending smiles and a pat on the head. However, one day, something happened that reinforced Leo's belief in an undeniable way. He was playing in the garden when he heard a different sound in the cooing of a pigeon. It was a repetitive sound, almost like a sequence of musical notes. Soon after, he saw 2 men dressed strangely, who had never appeared in the village, talking discreetly near the church. Later that day, he overheard his mother and the neighbor, Mrs. Maria, commenting on the sudden arrival of these strangers and expressing a certain apprehension. That night, lying in his bed, Leo had no doubts. The pigeon had warned them. The birds were really talking, and he needed to understand what they were saying. Maybe, he thought, they were even talking about the war. And maybe, if he could understand their secret code, he could help everyone. Leo's small room became his observation post. From his window, he had a clear view of the village square and the surrounding fields. The war had cast a long shadow over their lives. Food was rationed, and conversations often revolved around the latest news from the front, usually delivered in hushed tones around the crackling radio. The faces of the adults were etched with worry, a stark contrast to the carefree days Leo vaguely remembered before the conflict began. Undeterred by the skepticism of the adults, Leo dedicated himself to his feathered informants. He found an old notebook and a stub of a pencil and began to meticulously document every bird sound he heard. He would draw simple pictures of the different birds, sparrows, pigeons, robins, crows, and next to each drawing, he would try to transcribe their calls using his own invented symbols and onomatopoeia. He would then note down any significant event that occurred around the same time. He paid particular attention to a lone robin that often perched on the branch of the old oak tree in their garden. Its song was more complex and varied than the chirping of the sparrows. Leo began to notice that a specific sequence of whistles from the robin often preceded the arrival of the baker's cart, which came to the village twice a week with a limited supply of bread. This seemingly mundane correlation fueled Leo's conviction. If the birds could predict something as regular as the baker's arrival, what else could they be communicating? One afternoon, while observing a group of pigeons near the church, Leo heard a distinct cooing pattern. 2 short coos followed by a longer one. Just moments later, he He saw the village doctor rushing into the church, his face grave. Later, Leo heard his grandmother talking to a neighbor about a young boy from the next farm who had fallen ill. Could the pigeons have somehow signaled this? A turning point came during one of his observation sessions. He saw an elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, who lived alone at the edge of the village, hanging a specific colored cloth on her clothesline. Just before she did, Leo had heard a particular sequence of calls from a pair of blackbirds in her garden. Later that day, Leo overheard his father talking to Uncle Thomas. "Did you see Mrs. Gable's signal today?" His father had asked in a low voice. "Everything is ready for tonight." Leo's heart pounded. Signal. Was his father talking about the birds? Could the adults be in on the secret too? A chilling thought then crossed Leo's mind. If the birds were indeed communicating important information, and if his father was part of it, could this secret code be related to the resistance movement that he had heard the grown-ups whisper about? And if so, what dangerous secrets might the birds be revealing? Driven by his discovery about Mrs. Gable's signal, Leo's fascination with the birds transformed into a determined mission. He felt a growing sense of responsibility, as if he held a crucial key to understanding the secret workings of his village during the war. He started spending even more time observing, his little notebook filled with increasingly intricate drawings and notations. He even began to try and communicate with the birds, mimicking their calls with his own whistles, hoping to elicit a response or perhaps even influence their messages. He focused his attention on the area around the old mill, a place where he often saw different types of birds congregating. He had noticed that whenever a particular type of owl hooted 3 times in quick succession, a light would briefly flicker in the window of the mill's usually deserted top floor. This happened sporadically, always late at night. Leo began to suspect that the owl's hoot was a signal, and the flickering light a confirmation. One afternoon, while hidden behind a large bush near the mill, Leo witnessed something that made his heart race. A man, whom Leo recognized as Mr. Henderson, the usually jovial carpenter, approached the mill cautiously. Just as he reached the door, a robin perched on the mill's weather vane sang a specific, melodic phrase that Leo had noted down several times before. Immediately after the robin's song, Mr. Henderson quickly looked around, then slipped inside the mill. He emerged a few minutes later, looking more serious than usual, and hurried away in the opposite direction. Leo was convinced the robin's song was a signal for Mr. Henderson. Emboldened by this perceived breakthrough, Leo believed he was starting to decipher the code. He noticed that whenever a large flock of pigeons took flight suddenly from the church tower, a military vehicle would usually arrive in the village within the hour. He interpreted this as a warning. One morning, he saw the pigeons take flight and, remembering a conversation he had overheard about an upcoming inspection by high-ranking officers, he decided to act. He ran to his mother, his voice filled with urgency. "Mama, the pigeons. They flew away. The soldiers are coming." His mother, though initially dismissive, was struck by Leo's unusual insistence and the genuine fear in his eyes. She cautiously alerted a few neighbors. Later that morning, a military jeep did indeed arrive, earlier than anyone had expected. While everyone was surprised, no one suspected Leo's bird code as the source of the early warning. For Leo, however, it was a moment of profound validation. He was helping, even if no one knew it, but his involvement was not without its risks. One evening, while trying to get closer to a group of crows that he believed were carrying important information based on their agitated cawing, he stumbled upon a hidden meeting in the woods behind his house. He couldn't see who was there, but he heard hushed voices discussing something called Operation Nightingale and mentioning coded messages. A shiver ran down Leo's spine. This was bigger and more dangerous than he had imagined. The bird code wasn't just his secret. It was part of something much larger, something the adults were risking their lives for. The name Operation Nightingale echoed in Leo's mind, filling him with a mixture of fear and excitement. He understood that the birds were more than just messengers. They were part of a larger, clandestine operation. He started paying even closer attention to the conversations of the adults, trying to piece together the puzzle. He overheard whispers of coded messages being relayed through seemingly innocent means, and he began to suspect that the bird calls he had been observing were a key part of this communication network. One morning, Leo noticed a frantic and unusual chirping coming from the sparrows that frequented the town square. It was a rapid, almost panicked sequence of sounds he had never heard before. Simultaneously, he saw a familiar figure, Mr. Schmidt, the kindly old clockmaker, heading towards the bakery with a small, wrapped package. Mr. Schmidt was a quiet man, well-liked in the village, and Leo couldn't imagine him being involved in anything dangerous. However, the sparrow's agitated calls and the hushed conversations he had overheard about a crucial message being delivered that day sent a wave of unease through him. Leo remembered a specific pattern of sparrow chirps that his father had once absent-mindedly hummed while working in the garden, a tune he had never heard anywhere else. Could this be a part of the code too? He raced home and, with trembling hands, found the notebook where he had meticulously documented the bird sounds. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning his crude drawings and transcriptions. Suddenly, he found it, the exact sequence of chirps he had just heard from the sparrows in the square. Next to it, he had written, "Urgent danger, baker's shop morning." A cold dread washed over Leo. The baker's shop was Mr. Schmidt's destination. Was Mr. Schmidt in danger, or was he the danger? Leo didn't know. But the urgency in the sparrow's calls and his father's humming tune felt like a warning he couldn't ignore. He had to do something. Thinking quickly, Leo remembered seeing a caged canary in the window of the tailor's shop across the square. Canaries, he knew, sang loudly and often. He ran to the tailor's shop and, feigning distress, told the tailor that he had lost his favorite toy bird and asked if he could stand near the canary's cage for a moment to feel closer to it. The kind tailor obliged. Once inside, Leo started whistling the tune his father had hummed, the sparrow's danger code. He whistled it repeatedly, hoping the canary would pick it up and amplify the warning. To his astonishment, the canary started mimicking his whistle, its cheerful song now interspersed with the urgent chirps of the sparrow's warning. Across the square, Mr. Schmidt was just entering the bakery. Suddenly, he paused, a look of confusion on his face. He heard the unusual melody coming from the tailor's shop, a melody that sounded strangely familiar, almost like a whispered warning from his own past. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the door handle. Something felt wrong. He decided against going inside and instead turned back, clutching the package tightly, and walked away in the opposite direction, his mind racing. Moments later, two men in plain clothes entered the bakery, looking around intently. They seemed agitated when they didn't find who they were looking for. Leo, watching from the tailor's shop, felt a surge of relief mixed with a profound understanding. The birds, his father's humming, and even the canary had played a part in averting a potential crisis. The Operation Nightingale, Leo later learned through snippets of adult conversations, was a network of resistance members using subtle cues, including bird calls, to communicate and warn each other about enemy movements and intentions. His father, it turned out, was a key member of this network, and the humming was his way of remembering crucial parts of the code. Leo's innocent observations had unknowingly made him a part of this vital operation. Years later, Leo would look back at his childhood and remember the war not just as a time of fear and hardship, but also as a period when the innocent songs of birds held profound meaning, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The world may have been shrouded in conflict, but even a 6-year-old boy, with his keen eyes and open heart, could listen to the whispers of hope carried on the wings of birds. Imagine the silent courage of a child, whose innocence becomes an unexpected weapon against the darkness of war. Leo's story reminds us that keen observation and belief in something greater can have a profound impact, even in the darkest of times. If this story touched you, we invite you to subscribe to our channel for more narratives that challenge our perspectives and reveal the strength of the human spirit. Click on the links that will appear on the screen to watch these videos and continue your journey of discovery with us. Thank you for watching.